Welcome to the Tech Shift F9 podcast, a podcast dedicated to helping people reinvent their career in the age of technology. This week, we're speaking with Byron, BJ Beatty, a former professional athlete who spent over 10 years in football. And for the non-Americans out there, I'm in the football game where they don't kick the ball, but they kick the heck out of each other. He was a defensive lineman and has recently become a coach for the University of Tokyo team. Beyond his coaching role at the University of Tokyo, he's been tasked with helping change the culture and mentality of the whole team. Hi, BJ. Welcome to the Tech Shift F9 podcast. I'm really stoked to have you on these episodes. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you for inviting me because, when you sent me an invite, I was thinking like, wait, you want to talk to me?
Of course.
But no, yeah, I'm excited, to be on here and to speak. And, if I have anything to share with the people, I'm excited and hopefully I can share something good.
Let's get into it then.
Yeah.
So, BJ, first and foremost, tell us a bit about the beginning of your career and the moment where you felt you could make your passion for football into an actual career.
So, yeah, my football career actually goes back a long ways. I come from a family of football players. My father was a big time football star in our home community. My uncle as well. My uncle also played professionally in America in the NFL for 13 years as an offensive lineman, and that's with no injuries. He actually injuries ended his career, but he never missed a game because of injuries.
Amazing.
So yeah, and so that's kind of where my football career started. But as far as when I realized I could have a professional career was when the opportunity to come to Japan came into play, because if anybody knows the NFL, it is a business. It's a sports business, and your best ability is your availability. And unfortunately, after my senior year, I had a foot injury, which I had multiple fractures in my left foot, and maybe I think I would have been 6-7 months before I could even use it. And I wasn't a guy that was going to be highly drafted or anything like that, so I don't think it was ever in the cards for me. And when the opportunity to come to play in Japan, that's when I kind of realized like I can make this into a career. And 10 years of playing here in Japan, I saw a lot of guys come in and come out, but I always try to make sure that this is the stepping stone to something bigger. Where for me, I just was like, well, this was a second chance at something I never got a shot at, so I'm going to put everything I have into it. Yeah, when I got that phone call from somebody who says, hey, do you want to play in Japan? I mean, that's when I realized that this was the opportunity, and I couldn't let it go to waste.
Oh, fabulous. Well, the Japanese game has gained a lot with you coming over here, so thank you for that. In general, professional athletes naturally need to consider that at some point they need to have a career pivot or transition. When did you start thinking about your potential next steps, and did anything in particular trigger that thinking?
I've grown up around the game, and my father was my coach actually in high school, and just as I grew up, I knew I never wanted to be far away from the game of football. It's always been said it's the ultimate team sport, and I've always loved just everything that has to go into it, right? I mean, as players, we have to be physically, mentally prepared. As a coach, you have to be mentally prepared, and there's so many nuances to the game. And I mean, like I just had a conversation a couple of weeks ago with some of the players, because they're talking about, BJ, how do you know that this play was coming? Or hey, BJ, and this, they're talking about some of my highlights, and I'm like, well, you guys just see like this big thing that I did, but really there were hints out there that I found, and that's why I actually knew the play. And so talking about just like if a player's hand has 3 fingers down, if it has 5 fingers down, if his knee is pointing out, his knee is pointing in, there's so many of those small little details that can add up. I always kind of knew from a young age I wanted to coach once I hung up my cleats. And I would say when the switch turned on that it was going to happen, that I wanted it to happen here in Japan, I would want to say that was in 2019. I don't even remember what triggered it, but I remember I came home from practice one day and I told my wife, if I coach in Japan, I want to coach at the college level because that's where I feel I'll be needed the most. And that's where I feel like I can grow the most as well.
That's great. And having that insight, those 4 years, we're in 2023 now, knowing that
Hmm.
that's the path you were going to go down, did that change your actual approach to the way you were doing your day job of playing and training? Did that influence a little bit some of the choices that you made?
I guess my learning and just me looking at, instead of kind of understanding the playbook and then understanding my opponents, I would almost look at it as, okay, if I kind of 50% did it in a way where I got ready as of the player. I got ready as, okay, these are my assignments, these are the guys I'm going to go against. And I would get all that knocked out within the first couple of days. And then once, my coaches gave me my game plan, our game plan, and we had that all in set, I kind of went off on my own and I did, all right, if I was, the defensive line coach, what am I looking at, right? What are these guys trying to do? And kind of what would I want our guys to do and things like that. So, it was kind of those things. And luckily now there's so much information out there. I started grabbing like any defensive playbook I can from anywhere and just kind of, in my eyes, building my own philosophy of how I would see the game. The philosophies as far as defensively, how I would want my defense to play. And that's kind of the things I've been putting together over the last 4 years. And I mean, still to this day, I mean, if I'm not reading a book, either a novel or some kind of self-improvement book, I'm probably deep diving into somebody's playbook and trying to just gain just a little bit of something from them.
Oh, that's wonderful. And actually, that pivots into a question that I'm dying to ask, which is, you and I have been talking for a while. I know that you've been
Mm-hmm.
looking at learning about new markets and opportunities in general.
Mm-hmm.
But do you feel that today's easy access to information and all that technological tools that we have, even for a full-time professional athlete, can that make a career transition easier? Or did you feel that in your experience, having all that information out there was a little bit overwhelming?
I guess it depends on how you look at it, right? I mean, I know a lot of people who weren't ready to step away from the game, and it was something that happened that it wasn't their choice. Not everybody can go and like I'm very blessed to have played as long as I did and to have those things. And I think a lot of guys also too, as they're playing, some guys don't take those steps, right,
Right.
to prepare themselves as well. But I mean, with technology nowadays, I mean, there's so much, especially, I mean, there's like wearable technology now that's giving teams analytics on how the players, how much water he's lost, how much muscle mass he's lost, all within like that 3 hour of practice or whatever they do. I mean, I've seen, there's all kinds of technology coming into the game. Analytics is a big thing, right? It's always been a big thing in sports. And I think it should make the transition easier. Like I said, I didn't want to step too far away from the game, but with technology now, I mean, there's ways to be involved with not just, football, but any sport in general. I could be connected to if you take the advantages of seeing what's being used while you're a current player, maybe learning what it is on a deeper level. And so when you do step away from the game, that it makes that transition easy. I mean, even right, the connections that you'll make as a player. Like one of the big messages I've always told athletes that, well, and it can fit to any sport, but I always tell football players specifically that football is a tool. It's not the end game. Football for me was, I wanted to go to college. Unfortunately, my family wasn't going to be able to pay the, $48,000 a semester for me to go to Colorado. But I earned a scholarship, luckily, and I was able to go for free. But that was because of a sport. I was able to come to Japan, which, I grew up in Hawaii, and Japan, well, Asian culture in general is such a big influence on us in Hawaii. And I've always wanted to see Japan. So I looked at it as I can go to Japan, I can travel Japan, and I get to play football. Like, where's the, you know what I mean? Like, I
That's
was asked
wonderful.
people like, yeah, where's the downside to this? And and I had a long career. I met my wife, had my kids, and it was all because of a game. But the game for me was never the end game. It wasn't the end all be all. And a lot of people don't know how to take that transition. So, I always try to tell young people, use football as a tool. Don't let it use you, because it can take you far. I mean, look, football connected us,
That's right.
right? So, you were off in the banks, but because you like football and I played football and somehow we met, like I said, it's a tool. And if you use it the right way, I mean, it could take you a lot farther in life than playing ever will.
I love that insight. I'm very curious about one aspect of going from being an
Mhm.
athlete to being a coach. How do you handle the fact that you're not in the spotlight anymore and not capable of taking the game into your own hands, right? Your case as a defensive lineman, literally putting it in your hands. It must feel like a little bit letting go a part of yourself.
There are times, because I think it comes with the fact that I don't think it's not that I'm not in the spotlight anymore. But believe it or not, outside of game day, I really don't, I don't walk around like I'm somebody like special. I walk around like I'm a normal guy. But on game day, oh yeah, you best believe, get out of my way because I'm gonna try and destroy you. But I think now the one thing that the feeling that comes to me is that I see plays that are about to happen and my players don't see it. And I'm kind of like, yeah, hey, like we talked about this, and when I have those conversations with them, I actually catch myself and I reel myself back, because I understand that mentally I've played this game for a lot longer than they have. So I also have to realize that this isn't about them. This isn't about me. So as far as being in the spotlight, that's not a problem for me at all. I think it's where you talked about, right, having the game in my control and being able to do things physically is where I kind of gotta separate myself, because I see something. But if they don't see it, what I've been doing lately is, if they don't see it, that's a reflection on me. And that's a reflection on, I didn't prepare them enough. So then I need to prepare them more, is how I look at it now. When I first got started, that was something that was kind of hard for me to figure out at first. But like most things, right? The more you do it, the more you fail, and then you're like, oh, okay, this doesn't work, and now I can do this. And so it's still a work in progress. I'm still learning, man. I'm still
Of
learning
course.
every day.
And about learning, now that you're coaching young, promising athletes, I'm sure there's a whole set of additional skills that you are educating yourself on. And we touched briefly about the technology now that is available around
Mhm.
sports. So, how much of your time is dedicated to exploring different solutions that you could use practically for your, day-to-day training and coaching? And is there any specific area, for example, like artificial intelligence powered solutions that are catching your attention?
We actually started using this app that's called Go Army Edge, and it's kind of like a VR type of app. So you can create like virtual plays. And so what we've done as coaches on the defensive side is, we've kind of, for our first couple games, we've put in the team's main plays and things like that. And our players, and we're going to release this to our players, I think within the next week or so, where they'll be able to kind of, because watching it on film, when it's kind of going full speed and you don't really understand what you're seeing, where it's like, we can have the kids be like, hey, this is what it's going to look like. And then even our own playbooks, right? We can virtually have the defensive players move how we would want the players to move. And another thing that we've been kind of tinkering around with is like looking at how our opponent's plays would look against certain plays, and like what would get us in trouble, what would work in our favor, and things like that. So that's probably the biggest thing. It's kind of a VR, and the way I found it was actually seeing some NFL teams use it. So they'll have it and they'll hook it up to the projector, and they'll have it. They had it projected on this giant wall, and I mean, the VR players are moving across here and there, and you see like, the players are, communicating like it's a real deal. And it's kind of a way to get the just the physicality out of the game, being able to be more mentally prepared, because I think the physical part of the game, you can practice that separately, but I think what makes a really good player into a great player is that mental part of the game that that most players can't really pick up on. So that's been the big technology we've using. And I mean, there's all the video apps like Huddle that, we're using, and that's like the big video scouting video app that everyone's using and things like that. And they've just updated now where like now the analytics are even more crazier, like where it's easier for me now. It's like, I click on one button, I'll have like all the information I need, where like a year or two ago, it was like I had to specifically go and get everything and do everything myself. So it took about 2-3 hours out of the whole scouting process out for me.
But it's great to see how quickly these things change and improve. So you must keep you busy to just keep an eye out to these changes and updates.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, I'm talking about like I was in college, 13 years ago. And I mean, to think of the stuff that we have now, like would have sounded like science fiction to me in college. Yeah. Amazing. And I mean, that's just how fast everything's moving.
BJ, now that you're essentially in a management role, beside your work on the field, there are additional layers of responsibility, right? And in most jobs, although you don't really get taught that, unless I guess you do an MBA, there's a natural progression into a managerial role that sort of prepares you along from going. But going from being an athlete to a coach, that seems to me there's a sudden jump. How are you handling that part of the new job?
Oh man. I'm getting better at it now, because when it first happened, there was a lot going on when I first started becoming a coach. I was abruptly cut from my former team. So I was dealing with a lot of those emotions still, because I was planning to retire last season. Regardless of how the season turned out, I was planning to retire, but my team cut me before the fall season. So, I went from in June being with all my teammates to the end of July having to coach these college kids. And,
wow,
I was still trying to work through my emotions. And, I believe I did a good job. I don't, you'd have to ask them. I don't ever think I brought those emotions to practice or to our games. I always try to stay focused on the task at hand. And, when I had the time to deal with what I had to go through, I dealt with it on my own, because it wasn't their problem, But I definitely made a lot of mistakes early on as far as structuring practice, because I just jumped into the fire, and I kind of told myself, I was like, you're gonna mess up, but you'll figure it out at some point. And so what I've learned is now, right, how to kind of, the biggest thing is me teaching something and then figuring out how to keep it reinforced in their heads, and I have a lot of great coaches I can reach out to. My father, I reach out to him a lot. I think that's where my biggest hurdle has come early on in my coaching career, is kind of figuring out what my kids are good at, instead of the techniques that I know, the techniques that everybody else is doing, all the, the schemes and stuff. And, you can have all that, but if my kids can't do it, if it's out of their, tool set, then it won't work regardless. So, these last couple months, I've done a good job, I think, of individually looking at every single one of them, kind of taking a step back from what I was trying to do and looking at, this is what this player needs. And one thing I was like very lucky to have taught to me is that coaching is just, it is, right, like you said, is managing people and managing their emotions. So kind of being able to look at I understand that this guy, if I yell at him, he's completely okay with it. If I yell at this guy, he's going to take it a different way. So I have to approach him a little bit differently, and just kind of going through all those things. It's just a work in progress. And I'm not perfect at all at it. And but all I know is as I go on, the better I know I'll get at it, the longer I do this.
Yeah. I really like the fact that you mentioned that there's a support system of people that and trust that can help you, and you're not alone in doing this. And I think when people change careers, often they feel, oh my gosh, how can I do this? I'm on my own. But in fact, we have a network of people that can support us. I mean, touching upon that point in terms of being thrown a little bit into a new role fairly quickly, was there something moving into a coaching role that surprised you and perhaps you wish you'd known before taking on the job?
I kind of wouldn't say it surprised me. I think it it got to me a lot more than it would. But I didn't think it would affect me as much as it did, is what I'll put it. Because as a player, I had a lot of free time. Here it wasn't like the NFL where I'm gone all day every day. It was on Saturday and Sundays we would practice. I would be gone from pretty much 8 in the morning till 5 in the afternoon. So pretty much like a full-time job on the weekends. But Monday through Friday, all I had to do was either work out or have like a meeting that lasted maybe an hour or two. So during the weekdays, the longest I'm working is 4 hours. If we have my meetings, 2 hours if all I got to do is work out. So I had a lot of time with my family. I had a lot of time with my wife. I had a lot of time with my kids. When I went into the coaching job, all of a sudden it was I wake up, I work out, I take my two oldest to school. I'm still home, but I'm doing all this stuff to prepare for practice, prepare for our games. I pick them up from school at 2, but I need to be on the train at 3:30. And then we have practice from 5 to 9, and I'm catching the train home. I'm not home till about 10:30ish, and they're asleep. So I went from having like full days with my kids to seeing them for like 2 hours out of the whole day.
Gosh.
And so for me, just because family is very important to me, that actually threw a wrench in me for a little bit, because it was, now am I focusing too much on this? And then like, is my family okay? And luckily I have an amazing wife who kind of reassured me. She's like, no, we're good, I got this. And we've had conversations about what the future will look like, right? Because I'm sure, as I don't want to always be a position coach. I do want to work my way up and become a head coach, or if the opportunities come, take on bigger roles and stuff like that. And I know with that'll become less time. And she's always told me, she's like, look, this is what you love and do. She's like, we'll be fine. And so, and any free time I get, man, I'm on daddy duty. So
That's great. But I can appreciate how tough it is to rebalance life, right? Once you're
oh man,
sure about a certain schedule, all of a sudden a new job
mm-hmm.
takes you away. In overall, given your experience, what would you advise other professional athletes that are contemplating a career transition? What's the best way to prepare oneself for this change?
Man, just be ready. Just be ready. Always just, especially in the sport we play and I play, football. I mean, well, this is actually what a joke I've been telling a lot of the guys lately is go start playing golf. And they're like, why? I was like, because you can play golf until you die. I was like, you can't play football until you die. I was like, you can play football, unless, Tom Brady's the outlier, but, I just turned 35 this year. And I mean, towards the end of my career, like, let me tell you, I mean, there was a lot of ice baths,
Can imagine.
massages, I mean, anything and everything, chiropractors. I was in the onsen about like 3, 4 times a week. Even with all my tattoos, I found onsens I could get to. A lot. It almost went the other way, where like when I was younger, it was like 90% training, 10% recovery. Like as I got older, it went like 10% training, 90% recovery. But I would say just kind of find what you want to do. Find what your passion is outside of the game. If coaching is, start to get into contact with people who are doing it, who are doing what you do, what you want to do, and people who you trust, and reach out to former coaches. And I mean, that's kind of the way the football world works, right? It's all network and it's all connections, just like anything else. And if it isn't where you want to be, then I mean, like I always said, use football as the tool, right? I mean, in my 10 years in Japan, I've met people from all different walks of life, all different types of careers. And if you find something that sparks your interest, hey, reach out to them, get a coffee, get a beer, get something, and just start the conversation and just find out what the steps are. Find out what the steps are going to be needed for you to take that transition, because father time beats everybody in the game of football, and it's going to come for everybody. There's a day where you're not going to be able to suit up. You're not going to be able to go out there and knock heads around. So, it's better to be prepared. When you're in it, give it everything you got, but have that plan B, because there is a day where that game, you're going to have to say goodbye to it. So that's probably my biggest thing is just have a plan like anything else. And I think it'll also help with the transition. I wasn't planning to make the transition. So, I knew that's what I wanted to do, but, it was more of a hectic thing when, it wasn't all starting to get put into place. But I was very lucky to land where I am. And I'm very thankful for the head coach who brought me on into his program.
Oh, that's great. And BJ, I do have one last question for you. It's going to be a little bit controversial one, perhaps. So, who's going to win the Super Bowl this year?
That is a very good question. It's hard not to say. I feel like unless somebody gets them, the Chiefs are going to be back in it. And in the NFC, man, I honestly think, barring injuries, I think it'll be a rematch.
Ooh,
And I think this year
hot
the
take.
Eagles will get it. I think the Eagles, I mean, they already had one of the best defenses in the entire NFL, and they stole two of the best guys in the draft on defense. And, they were right there and things like that. But, the game, I mean, at the NFL level, it's so hard. I mean, it really is, just because it's just something I always talk about. I mean, the disparity between teams isn't as big as people think. I mean, you could see a team that's like, the who had the first pick this past year, but they were like 1 or 2 and something, right? 2-14, and then you have the Super Bowl champions. And I mean, it's not a big of a gap as people think. I mean, as far as the talent level goes, right? Talent level wise, I mean, some of these guys, most freak athletes you'd ever see in them, just doing what they do. But I mean, I honestly think the Eagles. I think the Eagles had something rolling, and now the guys they have on defense to even make it better. I'm biased. I'm a big defensive guy, so
Fair
so
enough.
yeah. I think if I really look at it, I think the Eagles have the best shot at getting it.
Okay. I guess we'll touch base in a few months and see if you're right. BJ, it's been wonderful. Thank you so much for your time and your insights. Really appreciate it.
Oh yeah, thank you for having me. I appreciate you.
That brings us to an end to this week's podcast. I hope you all enjoyed it. Stay cool, stay positive.